In today's video, we're going to make a halter top with a metal ring detail. For this project, we're going to need scissors, pins, a metal ring, thread, and fabric. I chose a fabric with quite a bit of stretch. We're going to start by taking our fabric and draping it over our shoulder. We're then going to take the corner edge of the fabric and wrap it around the loop. We can then place a pin to keep it in place. We're then going to pin the fabric at the side seam and wrap the rest around the neck. While creating your shape, keep in mind we'll be folding the fabric over for seam allowance. We're now ready to trim away our excess fabric. While cutting, we want to create another corner that's going to wrap around our metal loop. So shorten your fabric so that the corner lines up with the loop. You're then going to pin your fabric again at the side seam. We can then trim away the excess, keeping in mind a 1 centimeter seam allowance. And now we're going to trim the fabric to create the shape of our top. Again, remembering to keep a 1 centimeter seam allowance along the edges. You're going to keep cutting until you're happy with your shape. And then you can fold over all your seam allowance on the front and the sides to get a better idea of how the top is going to fit. We're then going to take our fabric and line it up with our side seam. We're then going to take our scissors and cut it so that it's the same width. This strip is going to wrap around and tie in the front as a bow. We're then going to cut a second strip that's going to align with our other side seam and again wrap it around so that it'll tie in a bow. Laying it all out, this is what the 3 pieces of our pattern are roughly going to look like. We're now ready to sew our side seams. All of the sewing we're going to do, because of the stretch in the fabric, is going to be with a zigzag stitch. We're now sewing the 2 side seams. To prevent fraying, I'm going to trim away the seam allowance and sew a second zigzag stitch. For this stitch, I'm going to make sure the needle goes over the side of the fabric. With the side seam sewn, we can trim the ties to the length that we'd like them, keeping in mind that we're going to hem the end. We're now ready to hem all the edges. Before we do that, because we've been roughly cutting our fabric, we want to straighten it out. So we're going to just trim along the edge to clean it up a bit. Then, using our iron, we're going to fold our fabric over twice and pin it to get it ready for sewing. I tried to use as little fabric in the seam as possible to avoid it being too bulky. You're going to create this hem along every edge of your shirt. As for the area that's going to loop around the ring, it doesn't matter how well you hem that because we're going to be cutting it later anyways. Now sew with a zigzag stitch. Because of the zigzag stitch, you can see there's still quite a bit of stretch to the hem. Once it's all hemmed, you're going to place it back on the mannequin or yourself and put your loop back in place. And then we're going to flip it so the wrong side is facing out. And then trim away the excess fabric so there's just about 1 centimeter or 1.5 centimeters on each side. Before we sew our ring into place, we're going to do a zigzag stitch along those 2 edges to make sure the fabric doesn't fray. Now with the 2 edges finished, we're ready to place pins where we're going to put our stitches. We want to pin the fabric so the 2 seams line up and it should be pretty gathered in the middle. And then we're going to do 2 little stitches where both of the pins are. And we're going to do that for both sides. The last step we're going to do is put a small stitch in the middle of the fabric, and we're going to do this using a handheld needle. This is just to make sure that the fabric and the ring stay in place, and we're going to do this again for both sides. Because it's just the 1 stitch, you should hardly be able to see it. And you're all done! Thank you for watching, and if you liked the video, please subscribe.